Welcome to Natural Fluency.
In the last video, we worked on the reverse dry run, the practice of moving your lips, tongue, and breath without making sound, building physical readiness right up to the edge of real speech. Today, we move to the next step. Based on that dry run, now we actually make sound. But what I want to show you today goes beyond just saying it out loud. There's a deeper reason your practiced English still breaks down in real moments. Why is it that you clearly practiced, but the words still don't come out in real situations? Why do memorized sentences refuse to come out as your own words, right when you need them most? The reason is simple. You're skipping the final stage of speaking, and that final stage is this: opening your mouth, producing real sound, and letting that sound transform into natural, automatic thought. And this brings us to a key idea. Prepared speech is real speech. If you've been following this series, you already know, real speaking does not begin suddenly. First, you see the situation. Then, you feel the intention. You lock into the rhythm. You internalize the sound on the inhale. You go through mental rehearsal. You complete the body's readiness with the reverse dry run. Only then do you finally open your mouth. Because all of that preparation is already in place, real speech is not about forcing words out. It's about releasing what's already ready. So today, I want to talk about how real speech should happen, and how that speech can keep developing until it becomes thought. Your brain handles speaking in 2 stages, and understanding this changes everything. When we speak, the brain shifts its attention as the process unfolds. In the first stage, we focus on the sound itself. Is my mouth moving correctly? Is my pronunciation accurate? Is the sound coming out the way I intended? All of our attention is locked onto production. But once the sound production becomes stable, your attention shifts. In the second stage, you stop monitoring your own sound. Instead, your attention flows outward, to the other person's face, their reactions, the meaning behind the words, and the rhythm of the conversation. So first, there is the stage of producing the sound accurately. Then comes the stage of communicating and connecting. Real speaking does not end with making correct sounds. It has to move toward connection with another person. And because real speaking is about connection, not just sound, it is inherently visual. Speaking is a performance. That is why real speaking practice should not be done with your eyes closed. It needs a visual focus. Look at the situation. Look at the other person. Use facial expression, emotion, and gesture together as you speak on the exhale. When you speak English, don't read off a script in your mind. See the scene first. Feel why the other person is saying it. Feel why you need to say it. When you practice this way, speaking is no longer just making sound. It becomes a performance involving your whole body. It is not just your lips and tongue moving. Your face joins in. Your emotion joins in. Your gestures join in. And this is not just a metaphor. The tongue and lip movements behind pronunciation are wired to facial expression through the trigeminal and facial nerves. When you speak, these systems fire together, which means your eyes, cheeks, and forehead naturally engage as part of the same act. So speaking with facial expression doesn't just look more engaging, it actually helps your nervous system coordinate better, which sharpens your pronunciation from the inside. When sound and expression move as one, speech roots itself deeper into the body. Now, let me give you the core practice method. I call it the 3-breath structure. Real speech is not something you say once and move on. It works best when you break it into 3 stages, each tied to a single breath. First breath. Delivery. Keep it relaxed. Within a single breath, say the sentence once, or twice if it's short, slowly and naturally. Imagine a real person in front of you. Speak with real feeling and real meaning. The focus here is simple. Does this message get delivered clearly? Second breath, compression. Now the intensity changes. Within one breath, repeat the sentence as many times as you can. This trains your speech muscles to respond to that pattern faster and more automatically. So, the first breath is delivery. The second breath is compression. Third breath, relaxation and release. This is where most learners stop. They spoke, they repeated, they assume they're done. But the most important part comes after that. After that final breath, let yourself settle. Release the tension. Soften the breath. Let your body go loose. Then, in that calm state, bring the situation back to mind. And notice whether the words return on their own. Why is this stage so important? Because this is where language begins to move. From bodily experience into thought. From body to thought. How language changes state. Like ice turning into steam. Let me explain this with one image. Think about ice. In ice, molecules are locked together. They can't move freely. That's the earliest stage of language. Speech is frozen to the body. Every word depends on the mouth, the tongue, the breath, the muscles. Now, think about ice melting into water. The molecules are still connected, but they can move much more freely. That is like language still being connected to the body, but now working with more flexibility. Then, think about water turning into steam. Most connections break apart, and the molecules move freely on their own. That's language fully separating from the body. You can think in the language without moving a single muscle. So, how does this transition happen in real practice? After intense, repeated practice in the compressed breath. When you return to normal breathing, the phrase you just practiced begins to rise again as thought, even without the breath pattern. Think about how it feels right after intense exercise. When you finally stop and everything loosens. Language works the same way. In relaxation, after focused practice, speech begins to turn into thought. And that sense of lightness and relief triggers a small dopamine hit, which makes your brain want to come back and do it again. How the brain adjusts speech. The efference copy model. If we look at this from a neuroscience angle, it becomes even clearer. Every time your brain sends a command to speak, it also creates a prediction, called an efference copy. It's like the brain saying, this is the sound I expect to hear, and this is what the mouth and tongue should feel like. Then, after you actually produce the sound, the brain compares the prediction with the real sensory result. If they don't match, the brain flags it as an error and sends a correction. Adjust the tongue. Reshape the lips. Each cycle tightens the accuracy a little more. On the other hand, if the prediction and the real result match well, the brain no longer needs to pay close attention to the sound itself. That's the signal that pronunciation is already working. And this is the neuroscience behind the attention shift I described earlier. Once the prediction matches reality, your focus is free to move outward, to the other person's face, intention, and meaning. So, this is what the efference copy model shows us. Speaking develops from precise sound adjustment toward intention, delivery, and communication. That is the direction of growth. So what happens when this process repeats over and over? Automation begins. But automation doesn't mean speaking like a robot. It means the opposite. It means freedom. Because you no longer have to pour all your attention into producing the sound, you become free to focus on meaning, context, and how to get your message across. Think about it. If all your energy goes into the act of speaking itself, you have nothing left. No bandwidth to prepare your next thought, read the other person's reaction, or engage with the deeper meaning of the conversation. But when automation develops, the act of speaking moves into the background, and thought, intention, and context come forward. This happens thanks to two changes in the brain, synaptic plasticity and myelination. When you repeat practice, the related neural connections grow stronger. That is synaptic plasticity. And when a neural pathway gets used often, the brain wraps it in myelin. Think of it as insulation around a wire. Signals travel faster with less noise. As these neurological changes build up, speaking starts to happen more smoothly, even without conscious effort. That's when your mental bandwidth opens up, and richer, more fluent speaking becomes possible. So real fluency is not just having a faster mouth. Real fluency is the ability to think, react, and connect while you are speaking. And there's one more thing most people overlook: rest. Most people treat rest as the opposite of training. But rest is not a break from learning. It is where learning is completed. Here is why. When you learn something, that memory is first stored temporarily in the hippocampus, a short-term holding area. But its capacity is limited. For a memory to last, it needs to be transferred to the cortex. And when does that happen? During rest and sleep. During deep sleep especially, the brain replays the same neural patterns it used during practice. The connections strengthen and the memory becomes more stable. As this repeats over time, the cortex can eventually hold and retrieve the memory more independently, without relying so heavily on the hippocampus. That is why this matters so much in language learning. After practicing some short lines, take a moment and rest in a blank, relaxed state. That moment helps what you just learned begin to integrate from the hippocampus into the cortex. If you keep stuffing in new material without giving time for integration, the earlier learning gets overwritten. After each practice session, take a break before you begin the next one. Even a short nap can accelerate the process. That blank, quiet time after practice is not wasted. It is where integration happens, where what you spoke begins its journey from the body into thought. Let me bring it all together. Real speech is not just opening your mouth and pushing words out. It is the final embodied stage where what you prepared in the reverse dry run is completed through real sound. At first, the brain focuses on pronunciation accuracy. Once that becomes stable, attention shifts toward communicative intention and delivery. Speech should be practiced visually, as a performance that uses facial expression, emotion, and gesture together. Through the three-breath structure, delivery, compression, and relaxation, language begins to move from bodily experience into abstract thought. As this transition is repeated, automation begins, and that brings you closer to real fluency, where speaking becomes thinking out loud. And none of this is complete without enough rest. So, remember this one sentence from today. Fluency doesn't begin because you spoke a lot. It begins when practiced speech returns as thought, in the silence after effort. If this video helped you, please subscribe and hit like. In the next episode, we put all of this into action. We'll connect the reverse dry run and real vocalization into one continuous flow. You will see the situation. Prepare through the dry run. Make the real sound, and then connect it back into thought during relaxation. We will go through that whole process together. Don't leave your English frozen as sound. Let it pass through the body and rise into thought. Thank you for watching.